Welcome back, everyone. I've got quite an interesting fly that I'm going to tie today, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history and the evolution of this fly. If you just bear with me for a while, it's got a very interesting name as well. It's called a turd fly. Now there are various imitations and style of tying this. It started with a fly that Ian Kitching tied, which was a floating prawn imitation, fished for grunter. And it's a bit of a grey area with who developed the fly, but I had conversations with petercoetzee, Conrad Botes and Leroy Botha regarding this fly, because they were very involved in the development of the fly. But it started with, as far as I understand, with Ian Kitching tying a floating prawn and then tying it with the articulated body, where he would tie two hooks behind each other, part of the fly on the back hook and part on the front hook, and he used deer hair for both sections. And then the whole thing evolved into using a synthetic for the back and deer hair for the front, and the whole thing evolved in that way. But at the same time, or around the same time, and I don't want to put a time frame to this because nobody are really sure who started the whole thing, or getting the whole thing started to where it is now. Leroy Botha, petercoetzee and Conrad Botes started using similar techniques, and they obviously had conversations with each other, and including Ian Kitching, and the fly evolved into what it is today, where they started using synthetics in the fly. They started using foam in the fly to make it float better, to sit better, have a better profile in the water, have better movement in the water, and sit in the right place in the water, in the water column. And now the conversations I had with these guys were very interesting, and they all, no one wants to take credit for it, but they all compliment each other for the work they've done in the evolution of this fly, which is great. It's great to see that guys work together on a pattern that's so successful, and they share ideas and work on each other's ideas and to develop a really good pattern. And the where we are today with the pattern is what we see most, and this is after the conversation with especially Leroy, saying that they're moving away from deer hair. Although I'm going to tie one with deer hair today, with deer hair on the back hook, and they use synthetic fiber on the back hook, and on the front they would use foam. Also, they moved away from deer hair, and they had different ideas with using foam. But Leroy started using started spinning foam around the front hook to keep it up and to get it give it more floatability. And that is the one that I'm going to tie now. The one with the spun foam in the front is called the gas head turd. So like I said, I don't want to put a timeline to and names to the timeline and say this one started with this pattern and it started, and then that one took it over or started developing it in a different direction. Everything over the last 10 years was done by these guys, these four guys, and where the original, as far as I understand, was Ian Kitching. So it's really one of those beautiful stories of a fly that was developed. It started at one point, it went into various directions. Guys started talking to each other about this pattern because it's such a successful pattern. Nobody actually wants to take credit for the pattern, which I definitely think that there's credit due, and they developed it into quite an amazing pattern. Now, the first one, like I said, I'm going to tie the gas head, which is a spun foam head, and then I'm going to tie one of in another video. I'll do a pattern that Leroy has been working on for some time, called the Iron Turd, and it's a very interesting technique that he uses with the foam to create that body, and I will show that in another video. But let's start with this. The fly is tied on a grip what I'm going to tie it on a grip 21711 NSL size 2, and I'll be using 2 of these hooks behind each other. So the back hook is tied with deer hair, and which is what I'm going to do as well. And you tie in a few legs first, and I use barred silicone legs, silly legs. I use 2 different colors. I use a barred brown and a barred orange, and you tie those in on top of the hook and make sure they split around. They are split and go around the hook to both sides. So I tied in with a bit of a figure of 8 before I just make sure, before I force them backwards like that. Then you've got an orange and a brown on each side, and from there you hold them tight and you trap them with a wrap pointing backwards. Like that. And I like to add a bit of crystal flash in that as well. So I take a strand of tan UV crystal flash and fold it double and tie that on top of the hook, same length as the legs. Now I've seen various versions of this fly, and with flash, without flash. Once I finish the fly, you'll realize that there are so many options. You can actually, it's not a specific pattern. This is a style of tying actually that they developed. So the pattern, the style is there, the 2 hooks, the articulation in the fly, everything is there, and you can decide how you want to tie it, how you want to shape it, what materials you want to use in it. It is such a versatile fly, and I think that is one of the reasons why it is such a popular fly. So you take some deer hair. I'm just going to use natural deer hair. Cut a clump, and this is a bit of a time consuming part of the fly. Put it in a stacker. The first clump you want to put in a stacker and get those ends together, because you're going to use the ends, tie the ends in to form those legs and stuff in the prawn. So take that, just very short. We'll cut it a bit shorter at the back. And you want those tips to fold around the hook, and you tie those in right there. And pull all those hair back and make a few wraps in the front. Now from here on, you're not going to need the tips. Just going to pack that hook tight with deer hair, and make sure all the short hairs are out. Cut the tip so you have a nice bundle of deer hair, and you trap that you're going to go forward and repeat the process until you have covered the hook. Now I've seen versions where they tie eyes in the back, where they tie a hackle in the back. I've seen one of the more recent versions of Leroy's where he ties tie the back section with fiber, and he silicones the back to look like a real prawn tail, which is very, very realistic. So there are many different options here, and I'm pretty sure that this fly will be very successful when it comes to redfish. I have fished redfish, and I'll definitely make sure to take a few of these with when I go and do it again in the Gulf of Mexico. And just keep on repeating this process. And a grunter is not an easy fish to catch. It's really not one of the easier fish. So these guys have really gone out of their way and developed a fly that's really very successful for these fish. And this section is not going to be on top of the surface all the time. So it is going to get water, it is going to get soaked, and it is going to sink. So not sink, but be just subsurface. But that is pretty much where you want the fly. The front section, the front hook, will keep the fly up because that will be tied with foam. And I also don't think you need to pack this deer hair super tight. There's a few bundles. Obviously the bigger the fly, the longer it takes to tie it with all this spinning. And that will be the last bundle of deer hair. I'm going to trim this while it's on the hook is in the vise, so you can get an idea of how it needs to be trimmed. You finish this off just like you would finish a normal fly off. Finish that. And cut the thread. Now what I always do is I first start by just trimming the excess. Works very well if you trim it with a blade. Cut it very short along the shank in order to open that hook gape, and it can taper a little bit towards the back. I then take it out of the vise and cut it from the back forward. Like that. You get much better grip with the scissors on the deer hair, and you can shape it very quickly into the right profile. Try not to cut those sharp deer hair tips on the first bundle that you tied in. It's not always easy to avoid that. And that is pretty much it on this fly. So let me put that back in the vise and show you what that looks like. Well, there. Now you can cut it a little bit neater. And you can put a bit of UV resin on that end just to make sure that that thread is secure. I normally do that just with a dubbing needle, add a little bit of resin there and zap that with a UV torch, and that's it. And what you do, you put this aside for the time being, and you get your other material ready and your other hook. And you put the other hook in the vise. And for this, we're going to use foam. So what we do is I'm going to tie it with a tan foam, cut 2mm foam in about 2mm wide strips, and I cut a few bundles and I keep them ready so it's easy to tie them. You don't have to tie and cut and tie and cut. But first what we need to do, we need to attach that section to this section. So we're going to cover the hook shank with thread. All the way to the bend of the hook. Then we put the deer hair section, the back section, through. I use 20 pound mono. It's going to be very difficult to break that. Put that on the hook so that the eye of this hook, of the back hook, is just past the bend of the front hook that you're going to start to tie on now. And you trap that in there, and it's easy to position that. You make a few wraps and you check that position. You can always pull it a bit closer or push it a bit, or pull it a bit away, further away, depending on its position when you tie it in. And you make a few wraps backwards and go forward. Now what I always do here again is I put a little bit of glue or resin on the hook shank just to make sure you bind that thread and the mono and everything nicely, so that stays there. And you wrap that forward. And keep that mono on top of the hook. Make sure it stays on top of the hook. Now when you get close to the bend, or to the eye of the hook, take those two ends, stick them through the eye of the hook. Make sure they don't cross, make sure they're right next to each other. And then wrap all the way to the eye of the hook. Bend those two ends backwards underneath the hook and make tight wraps towards the bend of the hook. And keep that underneath the hook, those two ends, until you get to about halfway. You cut them away. And that will not come out when you hook a fish on the back hook. All the way there. And I always make a few wraps underneath, just to make sure that you don't force that back section downwards. Tie. So now you've got that back section attached to the front section. Now the foam that you're going to put on, I've got little bundles of foam cut already, and that is I use about 8 pieces at a time. Put that on top of the hook, roll them around the hook and trap them to make sure that they cover the hook shank all the way around. And you can actually manipulate them, pull them in the right direction and force them to where you want them to be. And you pull that tight, just like deer hair. I actually did an article on this technique quite some time ago. I think the fly on my profile cover is tied with foam. It's a bass fly that I tied with foam. And you take that backwards. Take the next bundle. Again, 8 pieces. Make sure they go around the hook shank and trap that with a few wraps of thread, and you can push that backwards as well. Take another one, another bundle, and I find that 8 pieces at a time works quite well. On the smaller versions I tie with and the next bundle goes just in front of that second one, and just keep going with that until you've covered the entire hook. Now, any spinning work has got its pros and cons. Deer hair is usually a bit of a mess, but you can have much better effects on with deer hair than what you have with foam. But foam just makes it so much easier to get a fly, a surface fly, and keep it on the surface and keep it buoyant. So you just keep going with this, and you can cut it in any shape. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but you can cut it in any shape at the end of the day. I think the hair is more versatile when it comes to shaping it. But this is definitely a way of keeping a fly on the surface. When you're done with that, you just keep tying those fibers, those pieces of foam back, and you will finish that right there. And then you need to shape it, and then the fly is done. You can add a bit of UV resin or something in front. So now you've got a very hairy, bushy kind of fly, and I like to take my long scissors to shape this. I usually just cut all the big loose fibers. Once they are in the way, cut that out. Just immediately gives you a better idea of how dense it is, and gives you better, you can shape it better once you've cut all the bulk out. And I keep some of the longer fibers, or the longer pieces of foam rather, in the back. I'll just trim them a little bit at an angle. It just looks better. And on the top. And I actually had a conversation with Leroy Botha, who was one of the originators of the turd, and that was sort of during the shooting of this video. And the name of this version is called the gas head. They named this actually after a song in a band, and this was the first one that was tied with foam. So the other one that I'm going to show you is a technique that Leroy came up with, and it's actually a very neat technique that you'll be able to use in all sorts of other flies as well, foam crustacean type of flies. So this is a very successful fly for our grunter. I'll definitely tie a bunch and take them with to the States when I fish Omasasa, maybe to fish the mangroves. I think many of those species, redfish, you know, all those sort of species, even baby tarpon will probably eat this. So I'll definitely go and try that out. So that's the gas head turd, and the next one will show a different version of the fly. And please try them out. Please subscribe to the video, please like the video, and thanks for watching.